Are the Abraham Accords dead or alive following a new dangerous dance, a return to diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and the Iranian regime? We'll find out about that and much more on Al-Sharq Al-Awsat Lana, Our Middle East. I want to thank you for joining me, very special guest Aviram Bellaishe, a long time, almost 3 decades in the Arab world, in a variety of sensitive positions. You've also been a business consultant. You're an expert in all things security across the Middle East. Thank you for joining us. And another very special guest who is joining us from the Kingdom of Bahrain by telephone, Ahdeya Ahmed Noor, who was the former chair of the Bahraini Journalists Association. Welcome, Ahdeya. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm very happy to be here.
It's great. Aviram and Ahdeya, are you? Can you hear us? Nope, she's not hearing us yet. But well, let me start with you, Aviram. We are facing a crisis, to put it mildly, in the Middle East, and this program is Our Middle East, meaning it's a Middle East of, several 100 million Sunni Muslim Arabs, and as well as Jews, Alawites, Christians, Druze, you name it. We've got a Middle East comprised of so many different cultures and ethnic groups and religions. I think to the Western mind and to the Western eye, the Middle East is far more monolithic than it is in reality, wouldn't you say? And I think that sitting here in Jerusalem, the holy city, at the crossroads between Asia, Africa, and Europe, as you will say, we want to reflect the much more nuanced and complex reality in the Middle East. And the Middle East right now is on fire with the, I would say, cautiously re-engagement, if you will, or the return to diplomatic relations, the way the Saudis talk about it, with the Iranian regime. Many of our friends, including Ahdeya, will join us momentarily, will tell you there's no change in the Middle East. It's just a temporary different dance between two harsh enemies, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the most, perhaps arguably one of two most important Sunni Arab countries in the Middle East, Saudi and Egypt being the two leading countries, and its arch rival, the radical Shiite government regime in Iran, which is now spreading its wings across the Middle East via terror proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, Jihad, the Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, as well as other Shiite and Sunni groups under its control.
So first of all, I think that people that it's outside of the Middle East, they cannot understand completely the interest inside of the Middle East. So how the Saudi thinks, how the Bahrainian thinks, maybe how the Syrian thinks, so on and so forth. And I think that when you're seeing from outside, it seems to you very difficult to understand. And I think that we, first of all, need to understand interest and how it's going to change, and then to take it versus the Abraham Accords and to ask ourselves, well, okay, we started with the Abraham Accords, by the way, by the approval definitely of the Saudis, and then we are now seeing, at least from outside, a totally different Middle East right now. So you ask yourself, you say, well, Saudis now approaching Iran because they have interest in to finish or to deal with the war with the Yemen, with the Houthis, and then you say to yourself, well, China is in the Middle East because of definitely oil, and then to be straightening in the Middle East, and you ask yourself so many questions, and I think that the answer for this question would be, and we will discuss it later on, is what is the answer for that? What can you do after understanding this supposedly or from the outside chaos? So this is what I would say. I would really want to discuss what can we do, and I will discuss it later on.
First of all, I want to go back to the question, are the Abraham Accords dead? I would say they're not dead at all. If they were dead, we would have seen our Abraham Accord partners leave the accord and come out and begin to condemn Israel and cut off relations. That has not happened. In fact, we at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, of which both of us are senior members of the Jerusalem Center, and Ahdeya is a senior partner of ours from Bahrain, we hosted unprecedented 5 Arab countries in the end of March. We had Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, Sudan. That was not a typo, Sudan, and even a representative from a senior policy institute from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So that was in the middle of all of the internal domestic crisis going on in Israel over judicial reform and other political issues, and they all came. No one left, and that in my mind was testimony that the Abraham Accords are still on track, notwithstanding this return to diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, because that happened just before. I mean, it could have all blown up, but it did not.
I think that what we have done in the conference is showing my first point, that there's a difference between interest in the Middle East for the people-to-people approach. So there's interest between countries, but in the end of the day, what we have done is putting together African countries and Arab countries sitting together, discussing a better future for the region. How can we work together for a better future? Is it in, agrotech, for example, or a water problem, and I think that where we're sitting together, we showed that we can maybe deal with the issue in the Middle East with our approach of our center approach of people-to-people approach, because when we discussed with them the issues and the problem, we weren't discussing it like countries, we were discussing about big issues in the Middle East that's happening right now.
Absolutely. I just want to remind our listeners that the conference was called the First Arab-Israel-Africa Security Conference in Jerusalem. That included, as Aviram referred to now, 25 African countries from North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, including a number of countries that do not have diplomatic relations with Israel, such as Somaliland, the small country on that very strategic point on the Horn, the Red Sea, guarding or on the Red Sea route, which is a very, very sensitive route for terrorism and for criminal elements, piracy, and so on, as well as Somalia and Mauritania. I mean, we had a number of and Saudi Arabia and Sudan. We had a number of players that did not have diplomatic relations, and they all showed up together with 5 Arab countries, as we mentioned before. So this was an unprecedented gathering of African and Middle Eastern policy and diplomacy organizations together with the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and that has created a completely new we think, possibility for strategic partnerships on the issues, Aviram, that you're talking about, which are research-based strategic policy initiatives on security cooperation, on water security, food security, agri-tech, counterterrorism, political and social cohesion, all these issues that our African and Arab partners came to Jerusalem to discuss, because just to share something with our listeners, when they saw these 100,000 person demonstrations in the streets of Tel Aviv, in the streets of Jerusalem, we thought from our Western standpoint, oh my goodness, they're going to leave, they're going to hide, they're going to go into the bunker. What did they say? No, this is democracy. They said, they say in Hebrew, alavai, that it should be in our country, this type of vibrant democracy where people can protest, demonstrate in the streets, no one gets killed, no one gets hurt, and people can go out and express themselves freely. This was an insight, Aviram, into something that we had to remind ourselves, as Professor Bernard Lewis used to tell us, not to mirror a Western view onto the Middle East and Africa.
Exactly. So what I think is, first of all, 2 things. First of all, we are beyond politics. as a center, and what we have done was beyond politics. And we told them that we are happy to live in a country that I at least can say what I think about the government, whether I with or against. It's not important, because what important is the freedom of speech, and I think this is what they were really appreciate. The second thing it was that we cannot mention maybe all the countries that without ties with Israel that came, but they even approach you like day or two after the conference. We're saying we want to work together in order to initiate our country's connections. So it means, at least to my understanding, that when you're going to the approach, like we totally believe that you do it through people, okay, and convey message through people, and not through politics, and not through country to country. Because when you started by the question about the Middle East, and we talk about interests, so here you're talking about people that the interest is to live, to have a better life, to deal with the daily problems of food, of water, and what we shown them, that we as a center, this is what we want to do. We want to work with you towards this project, and to initiate with you this project. And that gave them, I think, the understanding, first of all, about Israel as a power of food security, of water and others, and then about us, about the freedom of speech, and that we are entitled as center to work toward these achievements. And I'm very happy to join this effort. It's amazing.
Aviram, we're all just as happy that you've joined, and we're also happy to share a special guest that we have waiting in her car in Bahrain. From the Kingdom of Bahrain, Ahdeya Ahmed Noor, who was the chair of the Bahraini Journalists Association, an analyst on Iran and the Middle East from Bahrain. She's joining us. Sabah al-khair, ahlan wa sahlan, Ahdeya.
Sabah al-khair, audience, and I hope that we'll have a rich discussion about what's going on in our Middle East.
Absolutely, our Middle East. Ahdeya, we want you to join us, help us think through this issue. You were so helpful at the conference. I had the great honor of being the moderator in the panel and having you sit next to me. Our viewers can actually see it on the internet. If you go to the, you can look up the Arab Israel Africa conference online and see Ahdeya sitting next to yours truly, Dan Diker, and weighing in on the question, are the Abraham Accords dead? And what is the danger right now with the Iranian regime spreading its wings via its terror proxies across the region? What do you think, Ahdeya?
What I think, Dan, is first of all, the Abraham Accords definitely not dead. When the accords were signed, they were signed between Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates and Israel, and the relations are continuing between the countries. Morocco joined later, Sudan joined later, so no way that the Abraham Accords are dead, and they will never be dead. Now, I know that we are going around the circle of the Saudi joining the Abraham Accords, and things have changed in the region. Every country has the right to look at its own interest. Now, in this game that is being played, I think Iran is the country that has been looking closely at its own interest lately. 7 years of attempting to infiltrate Saudi through the Houthis has failed. Now, with a war in Yemen against the coalition, and with internal issues that Iran is having, it cannot afford to continue this war. So now Iran needs to show the Arab countries another face. Both faces are faces of evil, of course, because Iran remains to be the regime, the Iranian regime remains to be the regime that finances Hamas, finances the Houthis, finances Hezbollah, and I truly believe this will not stop. It's just an attempt to take a break because of the atrocities being practiced by the Iranian regime towards its own people. The Ayatollah regime is attempting to stay in power. It's going to show that it has good intentions towards the countries it's having diplomatic ties. But I do believe we are smart enough to know that a country that has targeted us in 1979, a regime, sorry, that has targeted us since 1979 will never change. Now, diplomatic ties, when they are established, it means that flights will be open between the two countries. Let's not forget one important factor, and we all respect people's beliefs and religions. Let's not forget that there are sites, Islamic sites in Iran, where many Shias go to. And since the diplomatic ties with Bahrain, for instance, has stopped, it has become a little bit difficult for them to go. Why? Because they go with the excuse of visiting these sites, and then they come back having been trained in Iran to become terrorists. And there have been several attempts of terrorist acts in Bahrain. And let's not forget 2011. All of the people who had terrorist plans and had acted on it were trained in Iran, and they had all gone to Iran under the umbrella of visiting the holy sites. So this will not change. The diplomatic ties will start, and my prediction is once the flights start, a few months later, when things calm down in Iran, when they stop slapping and killing women for removing their hijabs, they will feel that they're strong again because they will have power over the people. And then the Iranian regime goes back to what it has always known to do. Since 1979, the only thing it has been clever at doing is interfering in other countries' affairs and targeting our security and our safety. It has done it in Abu Dhabi, it has done it to Aramco, it has done it in Bahrain, and these countries have probably good intentions and want something they call it in Arabic, tasfir al-malafat. It means zeroing on the problems. But zeroing on the problems is basically dealing with a regime that funds your enemies. Is the funding going to stop? Is that what's going on? Is zeroing the problem mean that the leaders of our countries are negotiating with Iran to stop the funding? There goes the good intention. Now, what is expected from the Iranian regime? It will not behave. The Iranian regime has failed. It will continue to fail. But what is more important than that is the danger of this regime becoming a nuclear country. Now,
right, that
this is
really,
not a
yes.
joke.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
It's not a joke. When we have Putin in the region, Dan, threatening every now and then to use the power that he has, Putin is an ally of Iran. Can you imagine another Russia in the region, another threat of using utmost power? Can you imagine countries having the nuclear bomb becoming more and more powerful? Iran's involvement in supporting terrorism in Bahrain has been so strong, and I spoke about that, Dan, in the GSCPA event that we had, that until last year we arrested 169 people called the Hezbollah Bahrain. So this is only 12 months ago. How can this suddenly change overnight? And by the way, and I'm being vocal and outspoken about the Iranian regime, and my country will start diplomatic ties with it. Because I have the freedom of expression, I can say that I am against dealing with this regime. As many people have said that they are...
Yes. No, I think it's a very important point that you... Yes. Go ahead.
Many people have said that they are against normalization with Israel. It's their opinion. It's what they think. We are allowed to think. We are allowed to express our opinions. And I believe that when the diplomatic ties come to with Iran come to starting flights and allowing people to go and see their families, I am with that, because I believe that people shouldn't be deprived of seeing their families. But let's be honest and clear about something. Iran doesn't have a military cooperation with Bahrain. It doesn't have intelligence cooperation with Bahrain. Israel has. This is a fact and a reality.
Yeah,
Israel has been involved with Bahrain on bigger and higher levels, so there is no comparison.
Right. I think, Ahdeya, if I might just jump in here for a moment and emphasize a point that you just made. Ahdeya made a very important point, which is a paradox. The paradox is that Israel and Bahrain have strong security ties, at the same time that Bahrain is on its way, perhaps, to restore diplomatic relations with Iran. So one does not cancel out the other. It just reflects a balancing of interest at a particular moment in time, which is a point that Aviram made on the way to the podcast studio and just before we got going.
I think that I started by talking about interest when you were asking about the region. And I think that when you understand the interest, then you can maybe understand the Middle East. But when Iran is becoming nuclear country, so you look at Saudi as one of the biggest, Sunni country, and you definitely they would like, to be with, like Ahdeya said, with a diplomatic connection with Iran, and this is the reason I think the Abraham Accord has not died, and also, inshallah, the not the progress, but towards the progress with Saudi, because while Iran is becoming a Shia country, a nuclear country that you talked before about spreading terror all over the world, so definitely Saudi see the interest in the region. So they would say, well, let's work towards the diplomatic ties with Iran, because they are next to us, and that's something that you need to do, and maybe we can stop the Houthis and others, while we understand completely that this is my opinion, we need to proceed towards connection with Israel, only because, first of all, the power of Iran, and the second, I think, to open some doors towards the Americans, when I think that this is the interest in the Middle East.
I think Aviram made an important point, both to Ahdeya and Aviram, that Middle Eastern states work according to their interest. And what we saw at the recent Arab-Israel-Africa conference in Jerusalem, with so many African counterparts and so many Arab counterparts, is they were here in Jerusalem, where we're broadcasting from now, because they had an interest to be here. What I think what many in Israel, and all the more so in the West, think is to confuse moralpolitik with realpolitik, meaning they'll come to your capital if they like you, but they won't come if they don't like you. That is not the Middle East. The Middle East is a Middle East that connects with you on the basis of interest. We've just seen in the last 22 minutes of conversation with you and Ahdeya that how true that is between Sunni and Shia Arab states. Also with regard to Israel, and this is where we at the JCPA have, as students of the Middle East, with ears open, eyes open, trying to be culturally intelligent, have said, well, wait a second, we have an opportunity here because of all these, this tidal wave of complexities in the Middle East, to really begin to forge new strategic relationships with all of these Arab and African countries, because they are interested in having these relations with us. One complicating factor, I want to reach out to you, Ahdeya and Aviram. The Hamas has thrown a further wrench into the works, because the Hamas, which is an Iranian-sponsored Sunni proxy based in Gaza, but with offices in Beirut and in Turkey, have essentially risen up now at this moment of complexity and chaos in the Middle East to take over the Fatah position of leadership of the Palestinian street by reaching out to the Saudis, and the Saudis have played the game, allowed them to come into the kingdom. Other Arab diplomats meeting Hamas officials, whether it's Sinwar or whether it's Ismail Haniya, and there are other what they call foreign emissaries of the Hamas, to meet with the Saudis now at a moment where the Saudis had actually put the Hamas on their own terror list as being outlawed in Saudi Arabia, and here we have this additional complication. How do you understand that, Aviram?
I think that we are talking about like 25 minutes about interest, and it's once again the same thing. Saudi was looking, I think, first of all at the United States, saying, well, let's see, United States, when it comes to Yes, when it comes to the attacks on Aramco, so you look at the United States, and then you say to yourself, okay, so I need to do something. Okay, I don't have a choice. And here also you see Hamas looking, I think, at what Fatah is doing in the last years and saying, well, let's talk about the Fatah leadership. Who is the Fatah leadership? What is they going to do? Is there going to be any progress, for example, with Israel? Because that's what the unique question, what is important question was been made many years ago. So I think that this is the Middle East to see a weakened point and then go straight to this and say, well, let's tie the connection with and Saudi. And this is what I think that they are doing. They understand completely the complexity in the Middle East.
And Ahdeya, how do you see the Palestinian issue now far more complex, with a possibility of a Hamas takeover of the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, or certainly a new member of the PLO that previously, certainly since 1987, had refused to be part of the PLO, but now, as Yonatan Doha Halevi, Aviram, and other Arabists have been suggesting, this bloody competition for power is now playing out against this very confusing scene in the Middle East. Ahdeya, your sense of it?
Dan, it's disappointing when for the past 70 years there has just been in the circle of negotiations, there has just been the PLO that has failed, failure after failure. And then with the failure of the PLO, Hamas rose to power. So imagine that the Palestinians, there is no other option to negotiate with anyone else. So it's either a failed PLO or a terrorist Hamas. And I blame the Middle East for not creating leaders that today you can talk to. Imagine, if we don't go far, if we just compare what's happening to France itself. France classifies Hezbollah's military arm as terrorist, but its political arm, it negotiates with them. So countries tend to leave doors open, even with terrorists, to have someone to talk to. So now in Palestine, who else do you have to talk to when the PLO has been ripping off the region with money and with sources, and hasn't done anything for the Palestinian people? So option 2 is Hamas, that has been backstabbing the Middle East and is a terrorist entity. It's a disappointing thing, by the way. And I don't agree with any negotiation with any terrorist entity under any name, whether it's a military arm or it's a political arm. But I don't believe that these issues will be resolved with Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist. Even if you talk to them, it doesn't mean that these talks will end up with anything that will be good for the region. It's a hopeless case. I don't believe in negotiating with terrorists.
It's interesting that Ahdeya says, at this moment, it's a hopeless case vis-a-vis the Palestinians. And the Western discourse refuses to accept that idea that right now things are not hopeful. And they're always, in the Western discourse, there's always another way to cut it in half. Win-win. Everyone can win, and Israel gets blamed as being the heavy, as being today the inversion of the David and Goliath biblical biblical calculation and image, where Israel now is perceived as the Goliath. But Israel took a very unusual move with regard to the Iranian regime, and just for the last 2 days, the son of the former Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, was in Israel visiting on Holocaust Day, the most sensitive, probably one of the most sensitive days of the year, and he was embracing Rabbi Louis D, and his 3 children, remaining children. His 2 daughters were murdered by an Iranian dispatched Palestinian proxy terrorist. And there is the son of the former Shah praying at the Kotel at the Western Wall and visiting Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum. What is your sense, Amiram, about the symbolic importance of the son of the former Shah of Iran visiting Israel at this particular moment? First time ever.
I want to connect this visit, if I may, to our conference, because in our conference we had Iranian representative, and he said, guys, look, if you will give us a message that you don't want Iran to collapse and to stay as a foreign country, you want Iran to be like it was before. So that's an amazing message for us, because we're afraid of what will become the day after. And the fact that if you would send a message, he said, that you want Iran strong after, but you want to connect and to reconnect with the same connection that we had many years ago, that's the message I want to hear. And I think that if you connect that to the visit, so there you have it. And if I may add another thing, is that when we, as the JCPA, analyze what can we do, so we talked about that. We talked about what messages can we send. That's one thing. The second thing, how can we connect people to understand that we want these connections together? And when he came to honor the Holocaust Memorial Day, so for us, that's a symbol.
It really is. Ahdeya, your sense of the symbolism of Pahlavi in Jerusalem during these very, very dramatic days for Israel and the Middle East?
Well, Dan, very important question and very important timing of actually, I believe, the legitimate leader of Iran, because what happened in Iran in 1979 was not a revolution. A bunch of terrorists kidnapped Iran in 1979. So that's not a revolution. That's terrorists taking over by using force against the Iranian people. And they continue to do so. A regime that today kills people because of hijab is the same regime that came with that ideology in 1979. So the visit.
Oh, I think we may have lost Ahdeya unless the Iranian regime has heard her and has tried to disrupt her comments through cyber. But I think where Ahdeya is going with this, Aviram, is that what we are doing at the Jerusalem Center with our Arab partners and with our African partners is really to forge a new dialogue and also partnerships along research-driven security initiatives. We signed, as the press reported, the first ever MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the official policy institute of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia for doing security initiatives along the Red Sea, together with them and Arab partners. That has never happened before. So we in Jerusalem Center have now really repositioned ourselves as the partnership institute for all things diplomatic, applied diplomacy, applied security, and what we call communication. And this is very much your brainchild and your thinking, being in the region for so many years. Speaking a beautiful Arabic and having so many friends and colleagues in the Arab world, that we need to be, the future for the Middle East is for Israel to be at the right place at the right time in a private setting like the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, a nexus for communications connecting the Arab world, Asia, Africa, and North America, and our sitting in the middle. The way our logo, which is the Heinrich Bunting cloverleaf, shows Jerusalem in the middle of the three great continents, and then not including North America, which was off to the side at that time in 1581. But here we are with the possibility of being the hub of communications, with everything being mediated on social networks in Arabic and in Farsi. This is an outstanding, historic, and unprecedented opportunity. Would you not agree?
Definitely, I agree, and I think that when you turn the center not only to think tank and to do tank, so then you ask yourself, okay, what to do? And I think that the fact that we started with a conference, that people talk to each other. And then what's happened, they came to their country, they discussed the conference, and then they approaching us saying, we want you to help us by tying the ties between the countries. So it means that also to a center, to a civil power, there is a lot to be done in this subject. That's one thing, the ability that people will know that if they want to approach, they can approach the Jerusalem Center anywhere, anytime, and in any language. And that's very, very important. The second thing is what message you are going to send. And the fact that we are sending a message that discuss not political issues, discuss problems in the region. When we are doing together with other centers in the Arab world, testing agrotech technology in order to ask ourselves, okay, there is a problem, how can we solve that? So it means that we are dealing with the problem, we are not dealing with the envelope of political issues. So I think that our power became, I would say, a civil power that people can approach us, people can hear our message in all the media and in all the languages, and they can really react, and they really can connect us. And this is what we are doing.
Your final comments along this line of the uniqueness of this new dialogue, this new discourse between between the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs and our Arab and African partners. Where is the interest and motivation that was a big surprise to us at the conference, and how important is it to have this, to develop this ongoing channel of communication between actually four continents?
Well, Dan, the center has become a place where people now sit around the table and discuss issues of concern to us in the region. And as you said, there were countries that have not signed any peace agreements with Israel, but the representatives were there. This is a great start when you have people talking, which also says something about their countries, that their countries also respect their opinions. And this has never happened before. It simply says that we are going in this direction that we want to go. Some steps are being slower than other steps for other reasons. And let's also not forget something. And what I will say stems from my belief in America. America should now have a stronger role in what's happening in the region. America has been a major strategic ally to the Middle East and to Israel and to the Gulf countries. What happened to the American role? We would like to see a stronger American role in the region. For the past few years, America lost some of its power here. And by power, I mean its alliances, your friends. So when you have friends, you need to look at the interest of the countries that you are your major strategic allies. I need to see more of America's role when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program. These are all very important things, and they are all, by the way, connected to each other. If one is solved, the other will be solved too. And I believe normalization of Saudi with Israel is also connected to the American stance towards Iran. So this needs to be looked at in depth, looked into by the Americans. Again, I say that because it stems from my belief in America being a strategic ally. I would like to go back to Pahlavi's visit, if you may allow me, Dan.
Please, final comments from you.
Visit was, thank you very much. Pahlavi's visit had a very strong message, and I don't know if I was cut off when I spoke about how he is the actual current legitimate leader of Iran, because in 1979, all this nonsense that took place was a bunch of terrorists hijacking Iran, and he remains to be now is officially the legitimate leader of the Iranian opposition. Imagine the man visits Israel, he goes and gives his condolences to Rabbi Leo D. for losing his family. He visits Yad Visham, a man who believes that the Holocaust happened. He doesn't deny it. He has no hatred towards America. Israel was an ally during his father's time. And all these things happen at the time where the region is going through a big change. Iran, without foreign support, this Iranian regime is never going to collapse. They are terrorists. They will kill people until they send people back home. This is the first time I would say that without foreign interference, this country's problems will not be solved. It will remain to be an enemy in our region. It will keep quiet for a while until it gets what it wants and then goes back to continuing to fund Hamas and Hezbollah and all its proxies in the region. Pahlavi's visit sent a message that there is a replacement. And let's not forget that this region has witnessed a lot of very disappointing things going on. A whole country, Afghanistan, is now being run by the Stone Age, a bunch of terrorists running a Sunni country, and then a bunch of terrorists running a Shia country like Iran. Enough of Sunni and Shia classifications and categorizing of countries. These countries need a big change, and without foreign support, without think tanks, without lobbying for the people of these countries, nothing will happen. Nothing will change. And I do think that whatever is happening today will eventually lead to the end of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, and the end of Hamas. And we're not seeing the other side of the story. I do think that zeroing these problems is not good news for Hamas and Hezbollah. They might look at it in a different way today that they are winning. And this is not true. There is another plan that we can barely see or we can barely analyze.
There you have it. Ahdeya Ahmed Noor, the former chair of the Bahraini Journalists Association, imploring us to engage alliances, advocacy, moderation, on the one hand in the Middle East, and on the other hand, on the other side of the cliff, is radicalism, danger, terrorism, and subversion. So that's what we've tried to deal with in this program, is that we have two options here. And what we're trying to do at the Jerusalem Center is to push the forces of moderation, or let's say embrace the of moderation, of productivity, of peace, and of goodwill between countries for their own national interests forward. And Aviram Bellaishe, longtime a security and diplomatic actor in the Middle East, probably knows the Middle East better than anyone, or as well as anyone, in the state of Israel and in the West. Thank you very much to you and to Ahdeya for joining us in this compelling program about it looks like the Abraham Accords, as Ahdeya said, are not dead at all, but just need to be revived, strengthened, and bolstered. And it looks like that possibility is certainly there. It's up to us. Thank you all very much for joining us on Our Middle East Al-Awsat Lana.